All right. Carl, thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, totally. My pleasure.
We were just talking about how you just got off the mountain
I did.
like 40 minutes ago.
I did.
Which canyon did you do?
So I was up in Little Cottonwood this morning.
Okay. I figured you had to be relatively close.
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
we're in Park City and you're like,
it was kind of like
I'll be there in 30.
land and hop in the car and start driving.
Love that. Well, we're going to get into what you do, but for everyone today, welcome. Well, for you, welcome to Make It In podcast. I'm so happy to have you on.
Absolutely.
For everyone today, we have Carl Weiseth here. And I'm going to let you do your origin story a little bit. I will tell the guests what I know of you. Speed flying, of course, what we're talking about. And you own quite a few businesses.
I own a couple.
There's a couple.
Or I'm involved in a couple.
Serial entrepreneur. I can relate to that. And you brought me something today as well.
I did.
I think from one of your businesses, it looks like.
I did. This is a third eye pine cone.
Oh, my gosh.
And I'm going to let you go ahead and crack the top off of that.
Thank you so much. I am so excited to see these in person. I've seen some of your videos and pictures. Oh, no way.
So this is a cross-section of the densest pine cone in the world.
Okay.
And it's a species they can only reproduce in forest fires. And they grow in the mountains outside Santa Cruz. We climb the trees and we harvest them out of the top of the trees. They never fall naturally.
Oh, my gosh.
And then each of these is a small cross-section from the very center of the pine cone. And it's just one cut per pine cone right at the very core.
Okay.
And it reveals that beautiful sacred geometry on either side.
Oh, my gosh. This is so pretty. Holy smokes.
Heck yeah.
I love it.
And
Thank you so much.
Totally, my pleasure. Inlaid into the center of this one is moonstone.
Okay.
And then there's 24 karat gold leaf, little moon cycle emblem around the outside.
Yo,
of it.
I'm going to get emotional about this. This is
seemed
incredible.
Like, from me just kind of getting to know you online, this seemed like it might be a good fit for you.
I love it, and I am going to put it on right now.
Awesome, thanks. There's a little care card on there. You can just rip it off.
I don't rip things off of presents, Carl.
Right?
I save the packaging and
Well, you can be a cool kid and wear it with the tag on.
I'm gonna wear it with the tag on it.
Yeah, great.
This is incredible. So I actually really wanted to start with the origin story of this company. So this is called Third Eye Pinecones.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, guys, this is absolutely gorgeous. I will show you a close up on the camera, and I'll do a closer up after.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you're gonna have to tell your story about what inspired you to start this. I think it inspired you to start it. I heard the story about you falling out of the treehouse, getting blown out of the treehouse.
I did.
And I honestly thought we were gonna spend all of our time today talking about speed flying, most of it. However, when I heard you crawled for like 8 hours to safety, can you just brief us on that? Do you mind briefing us on that story real quick? Like, this is part of Carl's origin story, I believe.
Yeah, no, it's a big part of just kind of my like perspective on life ever since then, and a big piece of what's kind of shaped the decisions I've made and the path I've followed. Yeah, ever since. So, I grew up in the Seattle area, and I went to university up in Bellingham, Washington, which is a beautiful little college town, and after I graduated, I got an awesome internship straight out of school and went to work in corporate communications for a big biotech company.
Okay.
And I worked there for about 4 years.
Corporate communications. What were you doing?
So
what does that entail?
I was doing writing and photography
Okay.
kind of for the company, about the company, teaching people what they did, and also sharing with employees within the business kind of like what was happening within the company, so everybody was abreast.
Yeah.
It was an awesome job, really amazing people I worked with, but also just boring as fuck.
Yeah.
And not
we can't handle that. We can't handle boring as fuck.
Not something that was making me feel inspired and alive each day. But it was really good money, and it was kind of like the quintessential pinnacle of what I could hope to have gotten for a job out of university. I was making more money than all my friends. I, was feeling successful and accomplished, and also going through that experience I think a lot of people do out of college of kind of like, well, I spent all this time working to get here, and like, is this really the thing that I've been waiting for? And so after a couple years, I toned my hours back at that job. And I had gotten really into just exploring the outdoors. And I'd grown up a little bit outdoorsy, but not particularly, not super.
Really?
And,
okay.
I'd been like camping for a weekend with friends a couple times, and camping with my parents a couple times, but like pretty basic stuff. And
did you just start hiking more, or how did you?
Yeah, I just started hiking more.
Okay.
And I kind of fell in love with the forest outside of Bellingham, and I was splitting my time between. I had I had a spot in Seattle nearby to the job, but I was in a minivan, and so I was kind of like living out of the back of the minivan.
Okay.
Had like the pressed khakis and dress shirts on one side, and then like the climbing ropes and adventure gear on the other. And I was exploring the forest, and I got really excited about this idea of building a treehouse.
Okay.
And
oh my gosh, that's so cool.
And ever since I was little, I love climbing trees. I love being up high, and so I started researching different construction techniques, and I started looking for the right tree to build this treehouse in. And I wanted somewhere that was like off in the boonies. I wanted somewhere that was big. I wanted to build up high in the tree, not build something that was 10 feet off the ground, but build something that
like
was
an actual,
like
a legit treehouse.
Like a legit treehouse, yeah, exactly. And so after 6 or 7 months of kind of traversing the forest around Bellingham, I found this epic, majestic Douglas fir tree, and I was like, "That's the one." And I started building a treehouse up there, and for the rest of that summer, I was building this structure, which was essentially a series of interlocking platforms that were suspended with like aircraft cable.
Okay.
And what that meant is that they could sway independent of the movement of the tree, and if the tree was blowing and branches were blowing one way and the tree trunk was blowing another, it wasn't going to pull itself apart.
Okay.
Room to move and
a little
breathe.
bit, yeah, okay.
And I really liked that idea for construction. And this tree was in a particularly windy area on the top of one of the tallest cliffs overlooking the San Juan Islands.
I'm sweating
the top
already,
of Chuckanut Drive. And the structures were kind of in between 90 and 120 feet up on the top of this tree.
Oh my gosh.
The only way up there was with a single strand rope. And so you'd clip in ascenders and then ascend up this rope and up into, up into the top of the tree.
So you're built, like you had to ascend and build, right? And
exactly.
Then,
And everything was hoisted with pulleys.
Yep.
It was a really fun project, and it taught me a ton about climbing and rigging and construction. I didn't have background in any of those areas, so I was just learning as I went, as I gather you've done with some tiny home stuff recently.
Yep.
So towards the end of summer, now passing into fall, late October, I was getting ready to go on a camping trip up in Alaska with a friend. This was going to be my first really big backcountry away from everything and cell phone contact. And, my first trip of that nature, and I had bought a bivy sack, which is basically a small one-person tent. And I was getting ready to leave in a couple days, and I kind of had this moment of realizing, wow, I haven't ever actually spent like a rainy night inside of this tent yet, and I'm getting ready to rely on this for my life for like 2 weeks in Alaska. I should probably go and test this out once, make sure I know what's going on. There isn't like a hole in here or something like that.
Yeah.
And so I looked at the weather very cursorily, and I wish it would have looked better. But I was like, oh, it looks like it's going to rain. And so I was like, oh, I'll go and I'll pitch this tent up on the deck, the exposed deck of this treehouse, and I'll get some rain. I'll get to experience what it's like. I'll get to spend the night in the tree. Awesome. And so I went up there, put the tent up, and it turned out that night was a huge windstorm that slammed into the Washington coast. And again, this is the top of the tallest tree on the top of the tallest hill, looking out over
squirming
the Pacific Ocean and the San Juan Islands. And
you could see the ocean from your...
Oh yeah, every night was the most gorgeous sunsets over the San Juan Islands. Owls calling back and forth. It was right above a lake as well, so I'd go for moonlight skinny dips.
Oh my
gosh, it was amazing.
Okay.
But this particular night, the tree was just getting buffeted by wind, and I woke up and it started getting, it was pretty windy the first time or two I woke up.
Yeah.
But it's windy every night. It's Washington State. It's a tall tree, so I was used to that.
Yeah.
And then at some point it got so windy that the material of the tent started vibrating in the wind, just.
Okay. Yeah.
And that's when I kind of like went from kind of dozing on and out of sleep to like, whoa, this is become fully crazy.
Yeah.
And even still, I wasn't scared or worried. I just was kind of like, wow, this is a really windy night. And I couldn't sleep. And so my thought in that moment, I remember having this thought waking up, was like, cool, I'm going to climb to the top of the tree and like ride around in the swaying winds. If I'm not going to be sleeping right now, this is kind of like a special, cool experience. And I feel really confident in my construction. I feel really confident in this tree.
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to get like blown over or something. So I'm going to
Well, it's been there for a while.
Yeah, exactly. It's been here for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
the top of the tree had like a really nice fork in it. I think it had been struck by lightning at some point, and so it felt like a really like robust top to the tree even to go and sit in. And so I opened the door of the tent, and
So you were legitimately going to go climb up in the tree and ride the tree?
Yeah. I mean, I'm
storm?
already at 90 feet, and I was going to go up to
like, yeah.
around like 130 at the top.
What's another 40?
Totally, dude. And
Okay.
Again, I've been up there so much. I feel very
Yeah,
comfortable.
got you.
But I opened the door of the tent facing directly into the wind as
shit.
a big gust of wind came. And that gust of wind, it inflated the edge of the
Oh my gosh.
the edges of the tent, and I felt the whole thing kind of like swell with air around me, like a windsock.
Yeah.
And it pushed me off of the edge of that platform. And it wasn't all at once. It wasn't a sudden, violent off and flying. It just pushed me enough that half my body went off the edge of the platform, and then the gust kind of died down. And I remember having this moment of like, oh shit, but I've got this. And I like slammed my hands down, and I caught myself for a second on the edge of the platform.
Yeah.
And, I've been climbing all summer. I'm like, cool, I can grab onto the edge of something
got
and
this,
like pull
yeah.
myself. I got this, you know? But I had this brief moment of realization. It's the last thing I really remember of realizing I've slammed my hands down, and they're on the little entry fabric of the tent.
Oh.
And so I haven't actually gotten
Got
the
the
platform. I've
platform.
just gotten like the fabric on top of it. And then I had this kind of just like, oh shit.
Oh.
And then this moment of acknowledgement that I was definitely dead, you know?
Oh my gosh.
And that was that was an interesting moment. It wasn't a like, I hope I can live. It wasn't, I hope I can save myself. It was
like,
just,
It's like acceptance.
it was
here we go.
acceptance and acknowledgement. And,
Ooh, I got chills.
and I wasn't scared. It just was kind of the knowledge that this is happening, and that's it. And there had never been a thought that from anyone who had been up there that you could fall from the top of this tree and live.
Yeah.
And so, when I went, that in my mind was game over. However, something like 6 or 7 hours later, I woke up in kind of an animal state at the base of the tree. I don't remember any of this, but I tumbled my way down the hillside in the wrong direction, away from civilization.
Oh shit.
And I had 6 broken vertebrae and 6 broken ribs, and ribs through both my lungs, and 9 shattered teeth just from the severity of the impact, just from my jaw snapping shut.
Yeah.
And ruptured spleen, ruptured appendix, I was all fucked up. And
You still don't remember?
and I'm not remembering any of this, but I came to, and I'm on the hillside on all fours. I'm kind of like breathing heavy, and I'm coughing up blood, and every breath that I take is just kind of like air passing over my lung tissue, but they can't inflate properly.
Oh my
And
gosh.
I don't know who I am. I don't know what's going on, but this is the first moment I actually remember. I just remember being on the hillside, and kind of looking up and realizing like I have to get to the top of this hill. And I wasn't far. I was maybe like 100 yards.
Okay.
And but just covering 100 yards on like steep terrain through ferns
Yes.
and bushes was pretty arduous. But I got to the top of this thing, and still no idea what was happening. Just in animal mode is kind of like the way I think of it. I was just an animal trying to survive. But I got to the tree. I saw the single strand rope kind of like floating back and forth. The sunlight was just beginning to hit the side of the tree, kind of the sun after the storm. It was like pretty calm.
Yeah.
And then at the base of the tree was my sleeping bag and this bivy sack, and they were covered in blood.
Oh, my
and
gosh.
I had this moment of feeling my awareness kind of just like spiral out of the sky back into my body.
Oh my gosh.
And then suddenly this acknowledgement, like, oh fuck, like, I'm Carl.
This is what happened.
This is my tree. This is the tree house up there.
Yeah.
Like, I've fallen, and somehow I'm still alive right now.
Yeah.
And then the realization, like, wow, if that's happened and I'm still alive, I must be super fucked up.
Yes.
Which is kind of how I felt right then.
Which is true.
I was
Oh my gosh.
pretty deep state of shock. But I was conscious, and I was able to breathe just enough to be, to keep myself awake. And
you realized which direction to
exactly.
crawl, I guess.
And I realized that all of my belongings were up in the tree still.
Yeah.
Including my cell phone. And so it's the
The cell phone stayed in the
The
tree?
cell phone is still in the tree. I know. All of my stuff was like stashed safely up there. It was just me and my bivy sack that got swept out.
Yeah.
And so I'm wearing thin, long underwear, no gloves, no shoes or socks or anything. It's like late October in Washington, so it's cold, and I'm cold. And and there's kind of this dawning realization, like, wow, I'm in big trouble, and I don't have any way of calling for help.
Yeah.
How
did you make the decision to? I thought about this a little bit when I first heard the story, but like, how did you make the decision just to like start crawling? Because I think some people would have just laid there.
Yeah,
I really do.
There wasn't any decision, and I've had people ask me that before. Yeah. There wasn't ever a moment of like
were you
deciding.
just
it
continuing
was just
to
like
move?
basic animal survival at that point. And
gotcha.
There's a brief moment of assessing the situation.
Yeah.
And every position I was in hurt, but the only thing the thing that felt the best was just to be on all fours, kind of crawling.
Yeah.
Or kind of stooped over, kind of protecting my lungs and rib cage and keeping my spine from being erect and the whole thing. And so I was kind of oscillating between crawling and being Quasimodo'd out.
Yes.
Kind of stumbling through the forest. But I knew a couple key pieces of information. One is that every evening a park ranger comes up that road and he closes the gates on the nearest logging road.
Mm-hmm. You could remember this.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. I was with it. Once I came back to, I knew everything that was going on. And I knew that I had until sunset of that day to get to that road. And it's not far. It's only about a mile away. However, it's a mile straight down a really steep ravine and then straight up and up the other side.
Oh my gosh.
And there's not a great trail. It'd be me kind of bushwhacking my way, but there's a little bit of a game trail worn at that point. And so I started moving, and I would kind of crawl, I'd kind of stumble, and then I would feel myself starting to pass out. And each time I'd feel myself kind of like losing consciousness, I'd kind of acknowledge that this might be the last time that I wake up.
Yeah.
And I don't remember that being scary. I don't remember, I don't remember any panic or fear in it. I just remember kind of like, kind of grim acceptance, but I would pass out, and then I would wake up, and then I would start crawling again.
Oh my gosh. And for like 8 hours.
Yeah, for like 8 hours. And
you made it
eventually I made it to that logging road shortly before sunset. And I knew that was kind of like the last push I had to give. And I also knew that once I passed out, I might not wake back up again. And so I just laid my body across the middle of the logging road.
Yeah.
And you got to picture, this is like me in long underwear, tops and bottoms,
blood
like REI
everywhere.
So not
dirt.
that much blood.
Really?
Bloody hands and bloody feet from just like crawling and not giving a fuck.
Yeah.
And then like vampire blood like coming out of the sides of my mouth. And so you got to imagine somebody like driving up that road, and there's this dude in an all black ninja suit laid like perpendicular across the middle of the road. And it wasn't actually a park ranger that found me. It was a hiker who was coming down from being hiking that day. And this is just like quintessential Bellingham pothead hiker dude. Comes down, there's this guy laying across the middle of the road. He parks his car like 20 or 30 feet away. Is like, what the fuck? He's trying to yell at me. I came to briefly, and this guy was kind of like standing like 10 or 15 feet away.
Hell yeah.
Just like, what's
I probably
going
would
on?
too. Yeah.
And he's trying to ask me questions, and you can see I've opened my eyes, and I'm like, quasi-responsive, but I can't talk. I can't like move air across my vocal cords strong enough to like make a sound.
Yeah.
And so I'm just kind of saying like, hospital.
Oh, please. 911.
And eventually this guy kind of gets the message. It takes a little while, but he figures out I'm not a threat. He comes over, he helps me get into his car, and I'm able to like assist a little bit in the process.
Yeah.
And then I'm in the front seat of his car, just kind of passing in and out of consciousness. I remember him like trying to encourage me to smoke some weed, that would like make me feel better, which I remember thinking
bro, my lungs
moment,
right now.
Yeah, I remember in that moment thinking was so hilarious. I was just like, that's awesome and really funny, and there's no way. But I also remember like kind of thinking about it, like maybe that would
that help?
Actually feel good. I was like, no, that wouldn't feel good. And he got me to the emergency room.
Okay.
And what was also funny is I just kept imagining that as soon as I got help, then I would be able to surrender, and everybody, doctors and nurses would come running, and like I wouldn't have to be responsible for my own process anymore. And we pull up at the emergency room, and he's kind of like, okay, like, what do we do now? And, looking for me to guide the way. And I'm like, barely holding it together, but no one can tell how injured I actually am in that moment.
My gosh,
and so
I'm so stressed out right now.
I kind of pulled myself out of his car and go limping into the emergency room. And I kind of think this guy just didn't really want to be involved,
Yeah.
I lay myself on the floor just right inside the like sliding doors of the emergency room. And, and again, I'm like waiting for everything to start happening, but instead like nurses come over and they want me to fill out paperwork and they're trying to ask me questions. And I can't communicate well enough. I can't talk. And so I can't communicate well enough to make people understand what an actual emergency this is. But eventually through like writing a couple things and through me just kind of being quasi unresponsive, I get in, x-rays start happening, MRIs start happening, whatever it is. And then they're like, oh shit, like, you're bleeding to death internally.
Oh my gosh.
And you're all messed up. And so, then it was 2 months in the hospital of just going through that process.
I am so stressed out right now.
Yeah, don't be.
No. No, like
I'm not.
I know you're not. Like, but I'm trying to like, I know that the listeners are feeling that too. Like, that's just like absolutely bonkers. How long ago was that?
So that was 11 years ago now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now,
11 or 12, I lose track. I
want to jump into like kind of how you then go from that to speed flying.
Yeah.
But one thing that you said that I thought was super interesting, I think this was on a YouTube video that you did for this company.
Yeah.
And I just love this so much, this necklace. It sounded to me like this, I don't know how this experience could not like change your life. You alluded to that it did and kind of like made you gain some perspective, but what did that do for you? I would imagine like having all those moments of like, this might be the last time I close my eyes was probably something to process in that moment or maybe later. But you had said something that said like, for your passion of living a more positive and genuine life in alignment with nature is, I guess maybe why you started this company or something that it means to you.
Totally.
Am I right?
So to bring this all full circle, I spent a fair bit of time in the hospital not knowing if I was going to be okay afterward, and there were areas that like had weird numbness and nerve pain and, just learning to walk again was a big deal. And again, it's 2 months flat on my back, just
before
wrecked.
physical therapy.
Before I can just be discharged from the hospital,
okay.
And then after that, months and months more of mostly being in bed and slowly beginning to do like basic functional tasks. And, anytime I try and ask the doctors, hey, how bad is this and what's my long-term prognosis look like? They're kind of like, well, you fucked yourself up really good. Like, we don't really know.
Yeah.
But don't count on being able to do fun stuff again.
Yeah.
And so I kind of had to make my peace with that, and I did, and it gave me a really different perspective on life just during that period of time, and I kind of reprioritized around maybe not being able to do fun, physically active stuff that had been, kind of what my life revolved around other than work previously. And so over the next 6 months and then year, as I began to heal and as everything came online and as I kind of realized, wow, I'm like actually pretty good. Like,
you do a lot more than
like
maybe
I
you
can
thought.
Do, yeah,
you were
exactly.
Be able
I can
to.
do more than I thought I'd be able to, and I'm like getting better quickly. I started to make plans, to try and do all of the things that had kind of been on my bucket list at that point, but that I hadn't been pursuing because I'd been caught up in the grind, and I felt that I had such a good job. I had an obligation to keep doing it because it'd be so silly to like bail on such a good opportunity. But I quit my job. I bought a ticket to Southeast Asia. I'd saved money over the past couple of years. I went and lived in Thailand for a year.
Oh my gosh.
I explored all over the place. I lived on like a little deserted beach with 9 dogs and 5 bamboo shacks for 6 months.
Oh my gosh.
I almost got killed again by a landslide out there. I had adventures, and then I came back and I moved from Seattle to Santa Cruz. And I was, I didn't have very much money at that point. It was kind of like, okay, cool. I need to figure out the next thing. And through a crazy circuitous set of coincidences and circumstances, ended up on a mountaintop in Big Sur, California, and stumbled across this beautiful pine cone. And I was with this woman I was madly in love with, and we were up there, and we had taken a little bit of medicinals on the top of this this mountaintop, and so we were both.
Your
in
mind
a
was
pretty,
opened
like,
a little.
Yeah, in a pretty like beautiful psychedelic sacred space together, and we found this gorgeous pine cone, and we picked it up, and we're kind of passing it back and forth, and brought it back to the tent with us that night, and then the next morning woke up, and we're packing up and getting ready to hike back out, and we're like, actually, this is like. We're just tripping last night. This is a really beautiful pine cone.
Yeah.
Let's bring this back. Yeah, we're in it right now. I've got mine on here too.
Yeah. Okay.
But let's bring this back as a memento from this gorgeous shared experience that we've had together.
Okay.
And so it came back and it lived on my windowsill in Santa Cruz over the next year. Just the whole pine cone, uncut, unopened. And it dried and cured and aged, and it never popped open, which I thought was strange. I always thought the pine cone was going to open at some point, but it stayed really tight shut, which is a unique characteristic of the species.
Okay.
And then one day I was looking at this thing. I was getting ready to move out of my house. I'd broken up with this woman. My life was in flux once again. I was really trying to figure out what it was that my offering to the world was.
Yeah.
And I think everybody can identify with that feeling of like, you know, feeling this like pent up like stoke and desire to like share something unique and special to you that nobody's ever done before and nobody's ever seen before, and grasping around for that thing. And I had a saw in my hand, and I was picking this pine cone up to put it in a box along with my other belongings. I was like, oh, I wonder what's inside of this thing. Yeah, exactly. And I kind of had a little bit of detachment from it as well. Like, you know, if I ruin this thing, it doesn't matter, whatever. I'm like getting ready to move spots. I don't care. Yeah. And I took a cut from it, and it just happened to be just the right angle, just the right thickness. There's so many different things I could have done in that moment that would have meant that this never came about. But the stars aligned, and I saw this beautiful pattern revealed inside of the pine cone. And you know, it was kind of a rough cut. I didn't know what I was doing.
Did you like use a handsaw?
No, I used a skill saw.
A skill saw.
Which I do not recommend. Anybody who wants to try this at home, do not hold a pine cone in one hand
Carl?
and then like a skill saw in the other. It's a bad idea. It's a great way to lose a finger. It's not how we cut them anymore. However, in that moment, it worked, and I saw this cool pattern, and over the next day or two, I started asking friends who had woodworking experience, like, hey, this is kind of cool. What should I do? And they're like, well, sand it down, you know, use a couple different grades of sandpaper.
Get it fine,
And so I did that. Yeah, get like a nice fine surface on it.
Did you put oil on it finally?
So I did. Well, I didn't actually.
Okay, you waited.
I asked for advice, and everybody told me to do that. They're like, you could use a tongue oil, or you could use a varnish or a lacquer. And so I made plans to go to the hardware store the next day.
Yeah.
However, that same night, I was hanging out with some friends, smoked some weed, got a little bit uncomfortably high, and was kind of like, wanted to like do something with this awesome, cool new project that I had. And I had a moment of remembering that I had a 2-part woodworking resin that I'd discovered in my belongings as I was getting ready to move. And I'd originally bought it funny enough, for making didgeridoos.
Yeah.
A project
gosh, that's
like
amazing.
Classic stoner project that you like dream of doing and make plans for and then never quite get around to and still have the supplies. And so I mixed this 2-part woodworking resin together. And then I had a foam brush for another random arts and crafts project, and I used a foam brush to apply a thin layer over the face of the pine cone where this beautiful pattern had been revealed. And I woke up the next morning and picked this up and was like, wow, like this was pretty before, but all of the colors popped. There's this beautiful pattern and this nice like glossy glass-like finish. And what's funny is if I would have waited and followed my friend's advice, the pine cone over time, I know now, would have slowly cracked open and disintegrated. It would look cool for a couple days, but then it kind of would have like fallen apart. And to this day, you know, this is still the exact same woodworking resin that we use to seal the pine cones of all the different things. And we've tried, you know, every finish at this point, but this is still the one that works. And so.
Can I see the back of yours?
Absolutely.
I'm just trying to compare to mine.
Totally.
Oh my gosh. Is this the OG one, or is this a different one?
This is not the OG. The OG one is like lives in storage in my place.
Is it?
Yeah, I've still got the
they're
original
all
pine
so
cone.
fun.
It's been all over the world with me at this point.
So how? Tell me. Okay, so speed flying.
Yeah.
I want to get into how we go from this to this. These are absolutely beautiful.
Yeah,
and
right?
and
Totally.
I have so much to dive into, but we're gonna look at a clip together
Cool.
of what speed flying is. Before we do that, for the people just listening, how can you for the people that are listening, how would you verbally describe what speed flying is? Because I can attempt it, but I will massacre it
All
for
good.
people who have no idea.
So it's essentially everyone knows what like a skydiving canopy looks like. You know, you can picture
Yeah.
somebody base jumping or skydiving. They've got this big piece of fabric overhead, and people do another similar sport called paragliding.
I was wondering if it was
where which is very common
similar.
here in Salt Lake City. This
Yeah.
is kind of like the epicenter of paragliding in the U.S. And this is another sport where you sit in a harness, kind of in a reclined position. You have the big fabric over your head.
Yeah.
And, you know, skydivers will jump out of a plane and deploy this thing and then coast to the ground on it. Paragliders will have a much bigger canopy overhead, and they'll ride around on thermals trying to stay up in the air as long as they can. And speed flying is a little bit like a fusion of the two of those. And so it's much smaller paraglider style canopies that instead of being made for staying up in thermals and coasting around in the air for hours, they're made to go down very fast. And they're, you know, more similar in size to like a skydiving canopy, but they're designed in a very different way.
Right.
Skydiving canopies are made to, generally speaking, there's obviously different designs, but they're made to get you to the ground safely. And they're not typically designed for forward speed. They're more designed for safe descent.
Okay.
Speed
This
wings,
is which kind was this?
that's a skydive canopy.
Skydive canopy.
Yep.
Okay.
A speed wing, unique kind of to speed flying, is like a fusion of those two, and it's made to glide forward rapidly. And so unlike a skydiving canopy that kind of like sinks towards the ground, this is really like making a lot more forward speed. And then they typically have trimmers on them, which are little kind of cam buckle tabs that you can release that will even increase that rate of descent more than it's set at the beginning. And so the upshot of all this is that you can run this canopy into flight off the top of a mountain and then coast down the landscape, you know, hugging the terrain, flying in gullies, and doing barrel rolls. And
I'm laughing because I've seen the videos, and
Yeah.
so like when you're saying forward speed, like it's fast, you guys. Like we're gonna look at the video, and so if you're not on the YouTube channel, go check out the YouTube channel, Making It Podcast YouTube, so you can see this and just check out his page. We're gonna tag him and everything at the end, but it's fast. Like what's your typical speed
so
down a canyon doing barrel rolls, Carl? I need to know.
So it's important to highlight the fact that there are many different sizes of speed wings.
Okay.
And so when somebody is learning to speed fly, and I run a school here in Salt Lake, so I'm teaching people,
That's amazing.
oftentimes they're like a little terrified because they're like, they've seen a video of me flying and they're like, whoa, that looks crazy and really fast.
Yes.
And, you know, at the upper ends of how fast I'm going is like 100 or 120 miles an hour if I'm diving out of a barrel roll. But usually
Hang on. If you're diving, the upwards of your speed is 120 miles an hour?
something like that. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I didn't know it was that fast.
I haven't ever speed gunned myself,
Yeah.
actually, like coming out the
Yeah.
bottom of one. But I think that's in the ballpark.
Yeah. Okay. I trust you.
And, yeah. And so, but the average speed when I'm kind of just like flying flat and
Yeah.
straight is probably closer to like 40, 50, 60, something like that.
Okay.
And the larger, I also fly, I fly a broad range of different speed wings, but in the videos that you're talking about, I'm typically flying a very, very small speed wing, which means it goes much faster. However, there are many different sizes and models, and the ones that somebody who's just kind of like starting to explore the sport on would be much larger. They go much slower, and you know, and typically you'll fly a little bit further away from the terrain as well. And so there's kind of a broad range that you can do in the sport, and it gives people a chance to kind of start on something that's comfortable and safe for them, and then slowly you'll downsize over time. And this is true of like skydiving canopies as well.
Oh, okay. Well, I will tell you, I am much more inclined now to maybe try it, because I was like, okay, this is bonkers. I know he does the school, and I'm excited to dive into the school, but that makes sense. I feel like maybe I could. Let's look at this video real quick.
You definitely could.
Together, and let's just kind of talk through. You can kind of talk me through this as you see it. This is
great. Oh boy, yeah. So this is
Oh, hang on. Let me come back to this. We're going to his Instagram Reels.
This is probably the most aggressive flight that I have ever done. And this is me on the smallest canopy that I fly, and
you guys,
one of the smallest canopies that is sold.
It looks like a video game. Okay, continue.
Yeah,
Smallest canopy.
And it feels like a video game. But this is a line that I've flown many times before this on larger sizes of wings to kind of like memorize it, know where the landscape undulates up and down, and be able to plan what I'm doing accordingly.
Is this one here in Utah?
And this is here in Utah at an undisclosed location.
That's fine.
And I've got brake handles with. And essentially, it's like the control devices for this. I'm using my weight shift. I'm using my hips kind of swaying left and right.
Okay. Guys, he's barrel rolling. For those on the podcast, he's barrel rolling down the canyon at fast speeds, getting very close to the train, it looks like. Like, you're getting close.
I'm very close to the train.
He's very close to the train, like hauling ass down this canyon with his... What do you call that?
Speedwing.
Speedwing. Okay,
yeah.
I was like,
and so in the pinnacle moments of this, I'm an inch or two off of the ground, and the air is very calm, and I'm using the brake handles to be able to control what's happening with the wing. And at any moment in there, if I need to pop upward, I can pull on both of those, and I'm going to move up out of the terrain very quickly. And so I can afford to kind of get low, and I can do that because I have the safety net of all of the speed, and the speed translates into lift if I need it to. And
so the speed is good for many reasons.
So the faster that I'm going, the more that I can pop straight up into the air if I need to.
Oh, okay.
To kind of get out of trouble.
Let's look at one more real quick, just a brief one on this one. This one, so Chris sent me. Chris is like, we've just been so excited since we found you, and just to like pick your brain on this. But so he sent me these two to kind of review. This one's called The Canyon, Salt Lake City. This one.
Yeah, this is actually that same flight, and this is a group of friends that I fly with regularly, and there's an awesome posse of pilots who fly here in Salt Lake, and so this is me out flying with a bunch of friends, and you'll see in this video I'm on a yellow wing instead of a blue one, and that yellow wing is one size bigger, and so this is me kind of still dialing it in. Getting ready for this line, and a bunch of other homies of mine out flying with me.
How many people did you have with you on this one?
Man, I think that day we had 5 different pilots up there.
Really?
And that's so much of what makes this so fun, is not just, the thrill and the experience for me personally, but getting to share these experiences with this awesome cadre of other badasses here who are like doing cool stuff, and who are grinding these massive hikes to get to these flights. And that's a big part of it. It's not just out there jumping out of a plane and getting a big adrenaline rush. It's going on these beautiful immersive nature experiences and sharing that with your best bros. And then flying down and cracking beers at the car 5 minutes later.
So, I mean, you have to know it has to be a relatively small community that's doing this, right? So you basically probably know everyone who's like speed flying.
It's been growing rapidly. And
really?
In Salt Lake, I think that it's fair to say that I know everybody who's kind of flying lines like this, and maybe at a level like is shown in that video. But there are tons of new pilots who are starting to speed fly, and the sport is starting to grow rapidly right now. And there are lots of people who fly slightly bigger wings, who are kind of just getting into it, who are reaching out for like a little bit of help progressing in the sport. And because it's so new, there hasn't been very many resources for people who, after they've learned the basics on a bigger wing, can reach out and start learning some of the more advanced techniques and maneuvers that accompany flying. And mostly that's happened in Europe. And mostly that's happened because they have gondola access. And so they can go and they can ride a gondola up and do laps. And out here, we're like hiking.
You're like earning every single flight.
Exactly.
Like with the sweat of your brow.
There are a couple flights that we can drive up, but they're not very exciting. And so mostly we're hiking up. And throughout the U.S. right now, not just in Salt Lake, but more broadly in the United States, the sport is rapidly expanding. It's this beautiful marriage of people's increasing desire to get out and connect with nature and go for big, beautiful hikes, but also have these like thrilling once-in-a-lifetime experiences. And, with the bonus of not having to hike back down, which is
Yeah.
for many people, myself included, like the least fun part of the process. You like got to the top of the mountain, you're like, yeah, we made it. And then
No,
you're
to
like,
hike back down.
oh, shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Help me connect the dots on how you went from, and I want to be respectful of our time.
Totally.
I have us at maybe we have 15 more minutes. That would give us an hour from when we started. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Help me connect the dots from the accident. And I don't know if they're related, but did you get your pilot's license first? How did it?
This is a great and funny connect the dots.
Yeah.
So there isn't really a connect the dots.
Amazing.
The very first time that I ever flew on ripstop nylon was in a tent out of the top of a tree by accident. And
you were hooked after that.
The reason I was up there is because I loved exploring nature and I loved being up high.
Mm-hmm.
And then, years later, after starting this pinecone business, after traveling music festivals all around the world and sharing my stoke about pinecones and nature and tree replanting and all these things with people, I met somebody who speed flew. He was cool enough to let me play around with his speed wing and kind of introduce me to the sport. And as soon as that happened, I was hooked, and I went and I got formal education.
Okay.
I was able to find the only instructor in the U.S. at that time who the only person who I could find. I've learned since that there were more, but in that moment, the only person I could find online.
This was about 10 years ago or
no, this
so?
was less that I started. Okay. That I actually started speed flying.
Oh, okay.
But I found somebody who could give me some basic instruction, and then I just started chasing it down. And every opportunity I had, I would try and fly. And I learned paragliding first, and then I transitioned into speed flying.
Was that the goal with paragliding, to get to speed flying, or was it kind of
Originally, it was just speed flying, and I did some of that, and then I realized that I wanted to have a broader skill set, and so I went back, and then I also learned to paraglide.
Okay.
And now when we're working with students, we're like, cool, if you want to speed fly, great. We have a progression where you can just focus on speed flying. You don't need to go back and learn to paraglide first, which is a really frustrating component for some people. They're like, I don't want to paraglide. Why do I need to?
Okay.
But regardless of whether people are learning to paraglide specifically or not as a discipline, they need to understand some of the skill sets that are involved.
Yeah.
And there wasn't anybody who was really breaking those down on an individual level. And so, I learned some things about paragliding. There's some really important stuff about weather forecasting and stuff like that I got to learn in that process. And then I started applying that to speed flying, and I started making trips to Europe and New Zealand and meeting the other people who were really progressing in this sport.
Oh, okay.
And starting to collect kind of the skill set internationally, and then bring that back to the U.S. and share that with other people.
So, okay, real quick, tell me the very quick difference between paragliding and speed. Is it just the speed portion and the size of your canopy?
I think there are lots of minutia, but that's the fundamental component.
Okay.
Is the size of your canopy in relation to how much you weigh.
Yeah.
Because obviously a 250-pound guy can be on a pretty big wing and he's going to go real fast still. So it's all it's a relationship between your body weight and the size of canopy overhead.
Okay.
And then also there are design characteristics that are specific to speed wings. They have that trim system I was describing where you can kind of let the trims out and go faster, pull them in, go slower, change your angle of attack and your rate of descent.
Okay.
But yeah, speed wings are kind of a specifically designed tool for this job, but there's a lot of interplay between that and paragliding, and there's a lot of paragliding pilots who get excited about speed flying later.
Okay.
And there are speed flying pilots who realize, wow, I love staying up for more than a couple minutes at a time. I want to learn to paraglide.
Because you're still heaving yourself off of a mountain, right?
Totally. Exactly.
You're heaving yourself off a mountain. You're just, it's a rate of descent and kind of type of canopy. Okay, exactly. I got you.
Yep.
So when you started doing that, what is it about that? Obviously the nature component is important to you, it seems.
Yep.
And then, we started the conversation with you. If the weather's right, you're doing 2-a-days.
Yeah.
So tell me about what else you're getting from that just keeps you coming back for more.
Yeah. Well, one component I suspect you're going to be able to relate to is exercise. And, I am somebody who needs to get exercise, a vigorous workout in some form or fashion, at least once a day, just to stay sane.
Yeah.
I'm just wired that way.
Mm-hmm.
And I also have found that I do better in all of the other components of my life if I'm giving myself a good aerobic blast once a day, you know? And so even on days where I'm not out flying and hiking, I'm still waking up, I'm going for a swim, or I'm doing like an hour and a half yoga practice or whatever it is to just like stay in that flow.
Yeah.
And so that's a big component of what I love about speed flying.
When did you realize that you needed that in your life?
Oh man.
Because mine's recent.
Yeah.
Mine's relatively recent,
right.
like in the last 2 years. And I now relate to that when people say like, I need it every day. I need it every single day or I'm going to lose my shit.
Yeah, totally.
And
you just can feel how suboptimally you're performing and where your mood and attitude is at, your enjoyment of your life,
But what made you, did you know that before? Like, was it when you started getting active outside that you started feeling better?
That's a great question. And that actually ties back to that tree experience.
Yeah.
That, part of me getting so excited about being outside and building this tree house was because I had spent so much time in the previous year or 2 or 3 in kind of an office environment and like drinking beer with my college friends.
Under those fluorescents.
Graduated. Yeah, exactly. And I just kind of started realizing, wow, I like don't feel that great. And
I'm not feeling swell.
Yeah. And so I started going for runs and I was like, wow, that feels nice. I still had some like weird lingering, like one of my knees had been injured when I was younger. And so it wasn't a big deal, but running just didn't feel great.
Yeah.
I'd run for like 3 miles or so and then be like, okay, cool, that's enough.
Yeah.
And running kind of felt like a way to get that fix, but it didn't feel like something that I loved. And then I started running in the forest rather than in downtown Seattle around a bunch of office buildings. And then those runs kind of turned into longer, just run, walk exploration missions where I was like, covering like 10 or 15 miles in a day and exploring. And that sense of exploring in nature was really the thing that got me, and, pairing that sense with physical exercise is really the sweet spot for me. And so, I'll go for a swim in a pool or I'll even go to the gym and lift weights or something like that. Not that it shows. But what I really live for is exercising in conjunction with epic nature immersion. And that can be in the ocean, that can be in the forest, but it's got to be like that for it to feel like the whole thing for me.
Okay. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Are there specific things that you do outside of your hiking to like train to do more? Like you said, you weightlift occasionally, you swim and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I just actually realized, like, I'm just imagining you recovering from all these injuries, and now you're freaking doing. How long are the hikes typically? And they're not like, they're steep.
Yeah, it's about.
You have to get in elevation.
There's like rock climbing involved sometimes. And usually it's about an hour and a half to 2 hours. So it's not that crazy lengthy of a journey. It's why we can get 2 in a day.
Yeah.
But it's, an hour and a half or 2 hours,
but
generally speaking,
cardio.
Of like, straight up.
Yeah.
Like,
you have to be fit.
A 5-minute break in there and you're crushing.
Yeah.
And so, people who are excited about learning to speed fly, that's kind of one of the first things we got check them on is like, like where's your interest or excitement in hiking? Because if you don't enjoy that component of this isn't going to be a fun sport for you to get into. But if you're somebody who loves hiking already, like a growing number of people in Salt Lake especially do, then what a rad sport to be able to pair with your love of hiking and then also have this just like pinnacle experience at the end of your hike when you're already at your very best and you're most present. You've just gotten to the top of a mountain.
Yeah.
Like, what better physical state to then do something that's like you need to be totally present for. And right then you're like at your best in that moment, and then you launch a wing and you pilot it to the ground. You land and you're stoked, and it feels like you got teleported from the top of this mountain to the bottom.
So that's one thing that when Chris and I were talking about interviewing you, we were kind of like, should we ask him why the crap he keeps doing it? Because we're trying to conceptualize like, and that's one thing I brought up is like, there's probably not many other things that you can do to force yourself to be that present. I mean, a lot of action sports will do that, right?
Yep,
like
totally.
you have to be,
Exactly.
or you're dead, or you're hurt.
Yep.
So it sounds like it's forcing you into presence. I mean, you're probably already pretty grounded and kind of I'm sure you practice that often because you're out in nature and you're just like in it. Mm-hmm. But how is that experience that you've heard from people who are new to it, like kind of feeling that state of presence? Like have people communicated that to you?
Totally. And
what's the conversation there?
I think the conversation is, it's both people communicating that they're having that experience and they enjoy it. Mm-hmm. It's also myself and my partner in instructing people, mm-hmm. communicating to the people who are learning the importance of like being in the right mindset and having like a clear headspace before mm-hmm. they go flying, and knowing when it's appropriate to just say, hey, today's not the day for me, you know? And that's really hard for people because, you know, especially if somebody's doing instruction or training, you know, they're out, they're like ready to go. They blocked out this time in their life to go fly, you know, or, you know, whatever. Maybe it's an experienced pilot and, you know, you made plans with your friends a couple days before. We're going to go do this mission. We've been watching the forecasting. It's perfect. Mm-hmm. And then the night before you break up with your girlfriend and like, you know, you don't sleep good and you're in a bad headspace, and the whole hike you spend like ruminating on whatever it is. And to be able to have the discipline to say, hey, like I'm not in a good spot for this right now, and I'm going to hike back down, or I'm just not going to go out today in general, is a really important skill for people to be able to harness as they're getting into not just the sport, but anything, you know, skateboarding, whatever it is. And, you know, one more component I'd add to that is just, you know, what we're doing when we're particularly sending something that's as committed as those videos you were watching. You know, not just me, but the other pilots in there too. It's like, you know, it's game on. Yes. And having a meditation practice or experience in, you know, in discipline, practice, presence in the moment can be really helpful for people in not just learning this sport, but in learning anything, you know, where you need to be able to flip the switch and go into an on state of presence. And, you know, not only is that a skill to bring to bear on it, but it's also like kind of the essence of the enjoyment. I've done a 10-day Vipassana retreat where it's like silent meditation on a mountaintop in Thailand in a temple. And, you know, that state of awareness that you reach at the end of, you know, 10 days of not talking and meditating all day is very similar to that little, you know, 2 or 3 or 4 minute blast that I get when I'm speed flying. It's kind of a little hack to get to step into that that's space. Cool. You know, that's really cool. Oh my gosh. Well, I'm going to say one thing and then I think we're probably going to. Yeah, great. Is that part of your like actually? Okay, 2 questions. Are you encouraging your students to take up a meditation practice to like get them ready? I would encourage anybody who's thinking about speed flying to do that. It's not a specific thing where we're like, hey, this is part of our instructional content. However, it's inevitably part of the ongoing conversation that we're having with people. And, you know, one thing that we're able to observe real quick with people is just kind of their innate capacity to that when they show up to do instruction. You know, it's very apparent very quickly who's able to kind of step into that space quickly and who maybe needs a little bit more help to be able to like reach that place where they've turned their thoughts off and they're existing in just pure action. In the moment. And, you know, inevitably, having built a repertoire of appropriate muscle memory and decision making is part of being able to be in that place, you know, is the practice and training you put in a non-committed environment so that when it is committed, you're not having to exist in your thoughts or your mind. You're just doing what you already know how to do, and you're serving as a channel for that to come through uninterrupted. How are you teaching people, or like, is there a checklist or something? Because I love what you said about trying to have that discipline, because it's so important in all aspects of our life. And one thing I've asked myself over the years, and I've asked a lot of friends, is a lot of my friends who are in the military, is how can you teach discipline and not break someone? Totally. So, and I think I've figured out something that worked for me, but how are you communicating that and having, like, what's the mental checklist you're telling your students or your good friends who are getting into it
how to mentally check and when to say it's not the day, and that's okay. Like, what are you instructing them on?
Yeah, well, we've got all sorts of checklists for gear and, you know, for kind of like for conditions. You know, there's checklists upon checklists for any of the flight training stuff.
Okay.
But when it comes to somebody's broader just kind of emotional state and awareness, it's less of a checklist and it's more of an ongoing conversation. And it's trying to share, and this is where just not just getting kind of technical instruction is important, but getting mentorship from somebody who does this regularly is important, because that's where these components that you can't really just make a checklist like, okay, am I happy today? You know,
right.
Like, did I break up with my girlfriend last night?
Yeah.
You know, it's more a conversation, and it's also why having accountability buddies who you're doing these experiences with to be able to provide you with that feedback, to be able to watch what you're doing and call you out on your shit, you know, either before or after a flight sometimes, is really important. And it's part of why talking to people who have done this for a long time is clutch, because we can be like, hey, like, you know, I've been there. I can see, you know, that you're not all the way together with it today. What's going on? Like, did you not get enough sleep last night? And they're like, oh yeah, actually I drank a Red Bull at like 7 last night. It was really stupid of me. How did you know? And I'm like, well, cause like you're kind of blowing it. And like, I can see you just trying to control your wing in the wind right now when there's no consequence, and you know there's no risk of you getting hurt, and you're not doing a good job at just that. So let's take a step back and either consider if we want to, you know, finish training tomorrow, or maybe we just work on stuff that's safe and on the ground today, and we save the actual like flying for tomorrow, you know. And those conversations translate into the future over the next couple of years and give people a foundation to look at their own actions as they continue to practice this sport and other things too.
That's amazing. I love that. Well, this has been, I could go on for another hour, Carl. So I hope that I can convince you for maybe a round 2 at some point. But I want to be respectful of your time. Tell us where we can find your stuff. Tell us about where we can find you, your flight school, and any of your businesses and any of your social handles. How can people find out what you're up to?
Cool. Well, our school can be found at speedfly.com, and it's just the way that it sounds, speedfly.com. And we've got all of our videos and stuff up on there. You can also see a lot more of just kind of my day-to-day videos, less, you know, kind of produced with drones and more just what I'm up to today. GoPros and 360 cams and stuff on my personal Instagram. And that's just at Carl Weiseth, my name. And then thirdeyepinecone.com is the name of the business and this piece that you're wearing right now.
Love it.
And
so
then
beautiful.
I also am a partner on another business, Third Eye Tapestries, beautiful visionary art from festivals reproduced on like large wall hangings. And
are you guys making, where do you make that? Where's that?
Those are made in India, so they're dye sublimated, printed by like a beautiful Indian family business out there.
Oh my gosh, they are beautiful. You guys have to check them out.
Epic artists from festivals all over the world. And then the last project that I'm super excited about right now is StokesPicks.com, and these are flavored toothpicks infused with a little bit of nicotine. And so for people who want to be able to have nicotine involved in their life, which is it's a beautiful you know, cognitive enhancing substance that's awesome in the right circumstances. It just sucks the delivery methods that people have been offered up until now. And so this is a way for people to be able to use nicotine and safely and sustainably, and also have like a yummy low flavored toothpick whenever they want to, if they're studying for a test or winding down after a day or something like that.
Amazing. So you guys check him out on all those platforms. We'll link in all of the descriptions. Carl, thank you so much for sharing how you're making a dent in this world. And I hope that we can have you on again sometime. And I hope that your flight later today, if you go, is amazing.
I'm gearing up for it. Awesome. I really appreciate you having me on. Thanks so much, Sarah.
Thank you.